Okay, I want to welcome everyone. I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon for our June WISAC monthly meeting titled Preparing for Safe and Inclusive Fall Elections. I am Lisa Lewis, the Administrative Manager at the Whitburn Center. Events for the 2025 and 2026 year focused on our partnership with the Wisconsin Alliance for Civic Trust, or WISAC, who hosted monthly network meetings on Wednesdays. Going forward, the Whitburn Wednesdays event series and the WISAC will be returning to separate monthly meetings. The Wisconsin Alliance for Civic Trust is a cross-partisan network of Wisconsin residents that promotes values fundamental to a democratic republic, including support for fair, safe, and secure elections, and support for peaceful engagement. The WISAC monthly meetings will be the last Wednesday of each month at noon Central Time. And now I will turn things over to Mike Leader, who will get us started.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for being here today. We are the Civic Trust and Election Integrity Group. So we're going to take a moment. I'll ask everyone on our team here who's on the call to introduce themselves, who they are, where they live, and where they work. So I'll go first. My name is Mike Leader. I live and work here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I am the director of the Center for Civic and Community Engagement here at UW Oshkosh. So I'll turn it over to Ali.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Michael. My name is Ali Khalil. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I work as the Assistant Director of the Emerging Leaders Network at Interfaith America. It's a national pluralism and interfaith organization working to support leaders bridging divides across religious, racial, and political difference. I'll pass it over to Faith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Faith Roska. I'm a youth policy advocacy coach at Kids Forward. We are a statewide anti-racist policy center, and we focus on long-term budget and policy solutions for children and families in the state of Wisconsin. My role is integrating youth voice into policy and budget advocacy.
Awesome. Thank you both. The other member of our committee is Representative Ahmad Rivera Wagner, who may be able to join us on the call at some point. So thanks for having us today. We have a couple topics we're going to cover, and part of it is open time for you all to talk. So we'll get to that point too. But we want to share some stories today from people who are engaged in different types of election work, offering some different perspectives to sort of share some ideas on how this is happening in different parts of the state. Talk about a few strategies for sharing information around elections. Open the floor up to all of you to listen to what you're hearing in your communities, and kind of give us some ideas to kind of continue to work through about how we can sort of help advance this work as well, and then share some call to action ideas. So that's sort of our very loose agenda for us today. So I'm going to kick it off, starting with some stories from people who are engaged in this work. So like I said, here at UW Oshkosh, I run the Center for Civic and Community Engagement. We're sort of the go-to place for a lot of election engagement work on our campus. And wanted to share some of these stories today because I think we're like many of the other UW campuses around the state. I get to talk to a couple of them, and we have some pretty similar experiences, especially those with polling sites on campus like us. And I think we're in a pretty good place, which is really good. So I think these are good success strategies to share that hopefully others can grab onto and sort of use in their own communities moving forward as well. So something that's really good for us pre-election is that the center shares information out to students in a very nonpartisan way. So we do a really good job of gathering that, all the election, voter engagement kind of type work, and getting that out to students via a series of emails. And those are messages that I have pre-drafted and our communications team on campus also review to ensure accuracy. And we get to send that out in a series, which has been good for notifying students at different stages what they need to know as they prepare, like when do you pre-register, when you start looking at information for candidates, et cetera, et cetera. Not overwhelming them, but giving them small pieces of that information at a time so they can digest it. And I think it does work because I remember the last presidential election cycle, like one of the last messages I sent, if you have any questions, let me know. And election day, I always get the emails from the students like, how do I vote again? It's like, okay, like I need some more information, but we'll get this figured out, right? So we can walk students through that process still and get them to the polling site so they can take care of that. But one challenge I've noticed with this, especially over the last couple years, is that the university has been a little bit more concerned about the content of the messages, really making sure that we only use official government websites which in the past we've been allowed to use some more of the sort of what I consider the gold standard resources like Pew Research for finding information about candidates or Vote 401, which is a really great nonpartisan thing. But they really moved us wanting to just focus on the .gov websites, which I think is a little bit of a challenge, but we can work with that as well. Something else that our center is able to do is really serve as a resource to connect students to the partisan groups. So we do an event called Voter Registration Fest, where we will cover sort of all the nonpartisan, how do you vote, how do you register information, but then invite the political organizations to also attend. So we're over here, we will give you that information. And then across the hall, you can get the information from the college Dems, the college Republicans, Turning Point, the Greens, Oshkosh Progressives, and we even invite in our county Dems and our county Republicans. And those external groups really appreciate that opportunity to talk to the students as well in a structured place. And I think it works well for students because they can get both sets of information based on what they want to get to, right? They don't have to talk to everybody if they don't want to, but if they want to learn about candidates, there are good people to go and talk to about those candidates as well. So that's been a really growing popular event for us here on our campus. So those are a couple pre-election things that have been working well for us. On election days, UW Oshkosh is a polling site here in the city of Oshkosh. It's hosted through our Culver Family Welcome Center, which has a big ballroom. It seats about 600 people, just to give you a size of the space a little bit. Now, what's been new this past election, last fall and spring, actually, I think just this past spring, our city has condensed some of the election sites. So we used to just be like our small, like 2 wards, but now we've taken over 4 polling sites. So our site plus 3 other polling sites have been added into our site. So that's increased the volume that's going to be coming through there. And we're really thinking about that for this upcoming governor's election, right? Governor this year, yeah. So we know that that's going to make things a lot busier, but we've already met to talk about that. So we had our reservations people there, our city clerk, myself, the team who run the site, really thinking through the strategy of that site. And honestly, one of our biggest conversations is where do we put the line for all of the people? Because we know we'll eventually just get backed up. But we've really been intentional about thinking about all of that ahead of time. And then think about and then after the August election, we'll reconvene to see did it work and what changes do we need to make before we go into November. We also work really hard to try to recruit students, faculty, and staff to serve as poll workers. And we have a number of folks who do that. And then they get placed at our site, which is really nice for them because they know the people, they can see fellow students there, et cetera. And that often works a little bit better. And then we also recruit a bunch of poll volunteers. They're always deputized and they're given specific responsibilities to do during the day as well. And then we always do a post-election evaluation where myself and the leads sort of talk through the site, what worked and what didn't work, and how do we make those changes. And that's been really good for us over the years to identify these challenges and constantly improve our election site. So if you can do nothing else at your sites, have them talk about what worked and what didn't work so they can make those changes for next time. Some of the other challenges that we've had, a lot of these have been identified via our post-election evaluation. But the pre-election, before students register or as they're starting to register, I think the biggest challenge is for our out-of-state students figuring out, okay, I'm from Illinois, how do I vote here in Wisconsin? And we get a lot of questions about that. And it works because they can get a free voter ID on campus and they have via their university information. They can have address verification that way as well. But it's just a couple extra steps that they have to work out. And we do our very best to sort of inform them about that. Previously, we weren't at the site we're at now. We're at a different site in our union, and parking was a bit of a challenge for our non-campus people. There wasn't great parking there. So that was one of the moves to move us to a different place. So that's something that we heard from people who were voting on our site, and we made the change to make it better. Lines is always a big problem when we have that 4 polling sites coming together, really making sure that we get the line worked out, but then addressing information with people in the line to make sure, are you at the right voting site? Because I don't want you to wait an hour and then have to go across town to a different site. So we're even thinking too about what information we post, like, a really clear map. Do you live in these areas, right? Like point to on the map where you live, because otherwise we have to get you to the right site, right? Just some of those things to really make sure everyone's in the right place. And what's great about our current site too is it's really safe and secure. It's a single building. We have university police on campus, and they can monitor that building really well, which works good. So it helps create any safety issues for us, which is pretty good. So those are some of the things that we're experiencing here on our campus. I know, like I said, some of the other UW campuses have some really good, similar positive experiences as well. But now I want to turn it over to Faith to share some of her experiences with her work.
Thank you. So my experiences are a little bit different as we don't work directly with polling or voters on election days. So like I said before, I work for Kids Forward. We're a nonprofit organization, and our main focus is on ensuring that Wisconsinites have the proper information that they need to vote based on what works for them. So we are nonpartisan as well. I think I mentioned that. But being a C3 and not having a 501c3 and not having that C4 arm really restricts what we're able to do around election years. So we are hosting our own gubernatorial forum near the end of July. However, you'll see that a lot of different organizations are hosting these gubernatorial forums, but a lot of times when politically involved nonprofits are doing this election work or work that could be perceived as more partisan, they're doing that through a C4 arm. They're just different rules. And so while we've wanted to partner with other organizations on the election work that we're doing, when they're even just them doing that work under that C4 arm makes it extremely difficult for us to engage in a way that doesn't give us some liability, seeing as we're a C3. And just in the last couple of years, coming down from the federal administration, there are just a lot more rules and it's a lot harder to play ball. So, for example, last year there was a domestic terrorism fact sheet put out. And while I may not consider that something that Kids Forward needs to worry about, when you actually read that fact sheet, what you learn is that it's kind of an all-encompassing moving goalpost, and that any type of political organization or rhetoric, even if it's meant to be nonpartisan in good faith, can be considered domestic terrorism. Um, some of the restrictions on gubernatorial forums is that, sorry, my cat is all over, but some of the restrictions on gubernatorial forums, they want you to invite the same amount of individuals from each party. Well, in Wisconsin, I'm not sure, I could be wrong right now, but as of a couple weeks ago, there were 10 Democratic nominees and only two Republican and one independent. So if we want to invite the independent party, does that mean we can only invite one Democrat, one Republican? And in that vein, I'm so sorry. One moment. Thank you. And in that vein, would us then selecting just one individual from each party, could that be misconstrued as endorsement? And obviously we can't endorse anybody either. What else do I have written down here? Yeah, so we can't endorse, obviously, we can't be perceived as endorsing. But it's difficult as a nonpartisan organization who's trying to ensure that Wisconsinites have the nonpartisan, non-swaying information that they need to vote to run into these restrictions, run into these kind of moving goalposts, some of which aren't even coming down from the state level, they're coming from the federal level. And we focus on state level advocacy, not federal. So I think that's all I need to share on that front.
Great. Thanks, Faith. Ali, you can take it over now.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So we're gonna transition a little bit. As I mentioned, I work professionally in Interfaith America, and I work with faith leaders and organizers across the country. And frequently, it's at that level where they're trying to galvanize voters, trying to educate voters, that they start to run up against some of the systems that make it harder, sometimes easier, often harder to understand how to vote, how to do it safely and in inclusive ways. And so I'm going to help us transition from some of the stories that Mike and Faith shared into some of the systems that perpetuate the conditions that create those stories. And so we've heard some important stories about what this looks like on the ground in Wisconsin. I'm going to zoom out a bit because I think that the infrastructure for sharing accurate election information matters just as much as the people who are delivering it. And as we've heard from both Mike and Faith, right now the infrastructure is very uneven across our state. So I'm going to share some frameworks for how we're thinking about trusted sources and message framing. And I'm genuinely curious later on, Mike is going to open this up to you all. And I'm curious to see if what you're seeing on the ground in your local context in your towns and cities matches what I'm sharing or challenges it. because I think that will be really helpful for this conversation. So I'm going to start with the baseline. What are municipalities actually required to share? So Wisconsin municipalities across the state are required to post election notices, polling place locations, and sample ballots, but the quality and accessibility of how they do that varies enormously. If you have, like I have, lived in different parts of the state of Wisconsin, I've lived in Kenosha, Milwaukee, and Madison, the quality and accessibility of that information has varied widely depending on where I live. And I've got some theories about what's behind that, but you might have your own. So there is no statewide standard for how a municipal election web pages should look, how information should be communicated, or importantly, in what languages that information should be available. And so I have seen it in my own community in Milwaukee. This creates both a trust and an access problem before a single voter can even show up to exercise their right to vote. And so I think there's two tiers worth distinguishing. So there's the statewide hub, which hopefully everyone on this call has been to this site, but myvote.wis.gov, that's sort of the definitive starting point for Wisconsin voters. It's nonpartisan, state-run, and it covers everything: voter registration, absentee voting, polling place, lookup, ballot preview, ballot tracking, poll worker sign up even. It is available in English and it's available in English and Spanish. I'm gonna put it in the chat because I realized I just direct messaged it to Paul. And more folks than Paul need to know about this. And so this is the URL that every organization, faith community, civic group should have on their website and in their social media. So if folks are on this call and they're a part of some of those organizations and that web page is not already included in the information you share, please share it. There are also some municipal gold standards. In our planning call, it was shared that the Fox Crossing web page is a model for what a local elections page can look like. It's got clear navigation, links directly to, thank you, Mike, links directly to the My Vote website for action steps, local sample ballots, transparency. It's basically a distillation of the My Vote website specifically for people who live there, which can help with the access issue. Because My Vote is great, but it can be a little bit hard to navigate because there's everything there across the state of Wisconsin. And as we've mentioned, things vary widely across municipalities. So not every municipality has the sort of filtered, distilled website, but Fox Crossing does. And so I'm curious. I'm a former high school teacher, so I don't like talking at you for 15 minutes straight. I'm going to ask you some questions. And so I'm curious for folks who are able to in the chat. And feel free to look at this question as you're looking through. But when you look at your municipality's election, whether it's Appleton, Fox Valley, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, Madison, elsewhere in the state, when you look at your municipality's election webpage right now, would you describe it as clear and complete, or hard to navigate and incomplete? So feel free to drop your city or your county name, and maybe a word or two in the chat about how you feel about your municipality's elections webpage right now. Okay. Kenosha improving. I love to hear that. Kenosha is my hometown. I don't live there anymore, but it's where I grew up. So I know it was not great 10 years ago. So I'm glad that it's improving. All right, I'm going to keep moving, but I'm curious to kind of I'll monitor the chat, see what folks are saying. I want to address the approved sources tension that Mike named earlier. He raised a real and growing challenge. Some institutions are now restricting outreach to only .gov sources, which cuts out trusted civic resources like Vote 411, Pew Research, and this is worth naming, honestly. I lived in a few other states over the last several years, including Atlanta, Georgia, which is sort of similarly in this purple state phase right now. There's a lot of attention on voter accessibility and voter information, and they're experiencing some of the same things. So, whole different part of the country, but some of the same issues are at play where some of the public universities, I worked at Georgia State University down there, and some of the state legislature is coming down on the way that some information is shared with student voters, with folks at the universities across Metro Atlanta. So it's not just a Wisconsin issue, this is happening across the country. And I'll just say that the instinct to stick to .gov resources is understandable in this environment where there is high level of distrust with institutions. And it also protects organizations like ours on this call from accusations of partisan framing, but it also narrows the quality of information that folks receive. And that there's sort of that double issue right there. And so a practical framework for this group, and this is something that I was able to sort of find via some research. So there's 3 criteria that's worth lifting up to determine whether a source is trustworthy in this regard. And I'll put that in the chat. So a couple questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about sharing information. Is this source nonpartisan? And can you find the funding? Is the funding for this organization, for this source, transparent? Is it easy enough to find? If it's not, that I think creates a different set of questions. Is it accurate and verifiable? Can you see that information reflected in other sites? For example, the Fox Crossing website takes information directly from the My Vote. And so you can see that that is verifiable and accurate. And then finally, does it direct voters to official sources for action steps? Ultimately, you want those sources to end someone at a .gov site, something that's run by the county clerk or whatever body runs voting in that municipality. But to get there, it might be a little bit harder. So myvote.wis.gov clears all 3. So does Vote 411 for the record. That's run by the League of Women Voters, and it has a long track record of nonpartisan voter education. And so I think these distinctions matter when making the case, when we might be in a position to advocate for the use of certain websites, certain information with more cautious institutions. And so last thing that I want to talk about a little bit is how to frame messages, what can be said and how. And so I think this is probably the most practically useful piece for this group. So a few clear principles that I have learned along the way working with a lot of folks who are doing this work on the ground. First is lead with urgency, or sorry, lead with logistics, not urgency. And so sharing things like, here's where you vote, here's when, here's what you need to bring. Saying that is a lot harder to politicize or to make yourself vulnerable to accusations of politicization than saying something like, make sure that your voice is heard. Both are true. Both are true, but in a high mistrust environment like we have in Wisconsin right now, logistics are what build credibility. Attribute to official sources. And so being able to say things like, according to myvote.wis.gov, the deadline to register absentee is ... That lands differently than a message that appears to come from an advocacy organization. Even if that advocacy organization has a long track record of trust, it's still an advocacy organization at the end of the day, and it exposes itself to even bad faith arguments. And so use the official source as the authority, and then position your organization as a messenger of that official authority's messages. The third one, normalize the act, not the outcome. And I think this is hard because, like, even though we all might work in nonpartisan organizations, 501(c)(3)s, state-funded groups, we have our own ideas, we have our own opinions, right? Like in my own personal life, I'm a partisan actor, right? I have my own political leanings and I'll vote one way. But when we're doing this work, nonpartisan voter communication is most effective when it focuses on participation and not the direction of that participation. And so saying things like, voting is how our community shapes what happens next. That works. this election is critical, while true, starts to sound like advocacy to an institution that is especially cautious right now. And so again, it's really about molding the message so that it can get out to the most amount of people. And then finally, and this is a rule of thumb across the board, meet people where they are, right? If you're on this call on a Wednesday afternoon, chances are you are in your circle probably the most educated person on voting and civic engagement in your family, in your friend group, in your congregation. I can't imagine you're here because you're brand new to this work. If you are, welcome. We're happy to have you. But chances are folks here are on among the higher level of educated on this work. But not everyone is, right? So faith communities, neighborhood associations, cultural organizations, those of us who are part of those groups, we can share that information in ways that government agencies can't. And so through the trusted relationships, in the right languages, in the right moments, that's how you can meet people where they are. And so that's the unique value that an organization like WISAPT can bring. And so with that said, before we open this up and I'm going to hand it back to Mike, I want to name something. The questions that Mike is about to ask, you are exactly why information infrastructure matters, where people get their information, who they trust, what they do when they're not sure. These are not like abstract problems. These are happening every day. And so they show up at the polling place. They show up on the sidewalk when folks are just catching up, talking about the upcoming elections. So we're all, Mike, Faith, and I, and Rep Wagner are genuinely curious about what you're seeing on the ground. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Mike.
Thank you, Ali. Loved what you shared. Definitely learned some things, and now we're gonna get vote 411 back into my list. So thank you for that great wisdom there. Before we jump into the open Q&A, I saw that Representative Ahmad Rivera Wagner is on the call. So if you're able to, can you introduce yourself to the group here, who you are, where you live, what you do, real briefly? Maybe not able to. All right, we'll get in there eventually, so it's all good. So we're gonna do
Oh, wait, were you asking for me at that moment? I'm sorry. This is Mary
oh
Beth
nope,
Collins.
not you, Mary Beth. I was looking
Oh,
for
oh,
Representative Wagner.
oh, sorry. Okay.
All good. Well, so I'm going to start the Q&A. If others want to jump in on this as well, please feel free to do. Ultimately, our goal is to take some time to open up the conversation for everybody on the call today. By the end, we want to take the things that you share with us and use them sort of continue to build out some additional resources. So we want to steal all of your best ideas, but also hear your challenges, because if it's a challenge where you are, it may be a challenge elsewhere, right? So we can kind of build accordingly on that. So I guess like our big overarching question, and I'll drop them in the chat as well, because some people like to read and then respond. But our big overarching question is, what challenges do you see at area polling locations or within the election cycle? So I will drop that in there. If there's anything that you see, you can either chat it if you want to unmute and answer as well. That's fine by us if you're able to do that.
Well, this is David Haynes. Sorry I was a little late. This is a great presentation, and I thought particularly the advice on messaging. That is right, absolutely right. We just have to listen deeply and go where people are, and use trusted messengers. So fantastic. But to your question, mis and disinformation comes first to mind. I mean, there's so much, frankly, garbage out there that. It's just really frustrating. I think for those of us who know what the facts are, Paul and I were just in a meeting yesterday with some allied groups regarding the upcoming election, and yeah, there's a lot out there. So that's one of my major concerns.
Thank you, David. I see a chat from Ruby in there. How do I, as someone in my late 20s something, get my friends to vote? A lot of people pull out. Does my vote even matter? Great question. We can work that one in there, Ruby, as well. I think, I'm going to go right to what Ali said. I would always tell them voting is how our community shapes what happens next, right? So that's the piece you want to give them right there. Draw them back in with that if you can, but we'll work on some other information there as well. All right, I'll drop the next two questions in there to give people more to think about at a time here. So the next one is, where do you see people get safe and accurate information about upcoming elections? So kind of, David, to your point, like, yes, there is, I think, misinformation, disinformation out there at times, but how can we, get people to the safe and accurate information? And or the converse point to that as well is, where are people getting this inaccurate or false information from as well? So how do we stop those sources from pervading through? So two sides of the same coin there. I was trying to think back for myself a little bit too about like what happens typically around election season. And I feel like the news actually does a pretty good job. I watch ABC News out of Green Bay a lot, right? And they do a good job of just sort of pushing the my vote stuff, pushing like the accurate dates. So I think that's a good trusted source to do. So I think I've always liked that myself. Mike Ford commented that not sure they always do. I think people get word of mouth and social media information primarily. Yes. Yes, Paul, I think some people don't seek out safe information. That is unfortunate. Well, as you continue to ponder those questions, I'll ask two other ones as well, sort of same sides of a different coin. Oh, some more coming in there. My vote, local clerks, local election admin websites. Cameron Kenosha moved a bunch of polling places in 2020, and people are still confused about the moves. I agree with you, Cameron. We've had some of that in Oshkosh as well with some of our moves. Signage on our college campus polling sites has improved. Um, Many new student registrations on election day. That's great. How do we recommend information for graduating seniors? Yep. That's a good bunch to get to, even some of that early election information into the high school process a little bit. How do you do that? Great. For our next set of questions, so we're sort of hearing where people are getting information from. Now I'm curious about the who, right? Who are the trusted voices within your community? And the other side of that coin is, where are the voices of distrust coming from in your community? That'll give us a little direction on like who we can lean into. Like I said, like I think ABC News out of Green Bay does a good job of really good information, right? But who are some of those other really great sources where you can get information from? Hopefully, our college campuses and our educational places are doing a good job with this as well. Faith, I watch a little bit of everything with a heavy grain of salt. Legacy news, independent news, local news, especially. I also tap into the policy network, happen to be a part of. It's more relevant proximity to what's actually going on at a state level. That's great. Yeah. Legal Women Voters, always a great source. Yeah. Plug for Legacy News, they do a good job. Yeah. Local clerks are trying to do a good job. Now, we are actually talking with our local clerk about putting some information into our local newspaper. We have a really great local newspaper, the Oshkosh Herald, trying to get some information into that news source as well this next cycle if we can. All right, and then we have one last question. People still dropping some answers in there. Some community Facebook groups. Yep, definitely rumors spread like wildfire there, which is kind of tough to combat. Thank you, Mike. All right, our last question for the group is, have you personally experienced a moment where you weren't sure whether election information you received was accurate, and what did you do with it? Again, thank you for all the feedback. We will be collecting all this information and using it for our resources moving forward. Team's too good here. You guys don't get fooled by fake information. That's great. Representative Wagner, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. So good to see everyone. My name is Ahmad Wagner. I'm the state representative for Green Bay, the number one place to live in the United States, according to U.S. News and World Report, home to the Green Bay Packers, and to me and my husband and our two golden doodles. I used to be the chief of staff of the mayor of Green Bay, where, as many of you probably know, Green Bay was this centerpiece of the election conspiracy theories that riddled Wisconsin to this day, that led to death threats, harassment, stalking of voters, of poll workers, and of death threats to elected officials. So much so that the state legislature, before I got in it, actually tried to arrest the mayor of Green Bay and Madison. And so I'm deeply invested in making sure that we don't allow 2020 ever to happen again. And one of the things is that we often had too many good people who care deeply about democracy, believing that misinformation and threats and harassment would go away. And we didn't really put into place the kind of tools that we needed to protect both the folks in operating our voting, but also the voters themselves. And so I'm really excited to be part of this conversation, this group, this panel of folks really exploring. We've got to start showing up in these local communities. Not every conversation is meant to be a national one. And when you go community by community, you can see improvements. And there's lots of ways in which we trust one another. But it's the nationalization of our elections that's becoming fuel for misinformation when some people don't like when they lose. So I think that's all you need. I'm first year term. I'm in my office. I'm in Madison today. I like brats and burgers and doing hikes with my golden doodles, Appa and Lambo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. All right. Well, I know, so that's sort of our Q&A time. If there's a little time at the end, we can always stick around and chat some more, or you can hit any of us up independently as well. We'd really appreciate that. Faith, did you want to take over the call to action part for us?
Yes, I can. I will do my best. So, as most call to actions, I would encourage you to continue engaging with the WISACT events as they come up. I would encourage you to continue engaging in these nonpartisan or otherwise learning activities. Like Elise said, obviously we all have our own leanings, our own affiliations as our private persons, but I do, even in my personal life, prefer to engage in nonpartisan learning opportunities. There's usually the most breathing room in those spaces. Is there anything you would add, Michael? That's all I can really think of in the moment. You're muted.
I did realize that after I was halfway through. Thank you. That's great. I'd say also encourage people, like, they can be involved in the election processes in a number of ways, right? You can be a poll worker and you get paid a little bit, right? So that's a day, take a vacation day and make a little bit of money at the same time and hang out with the polls yourself. I know in Oshkosh they had challenges getting people for a while, so they started half-day options, and that really increased the number of poll workers because a full day at the polls is a very long day. But you can be a poll worker, you can be an election observer, you can work with one of the political parties and sign up to be an election observer. Also need those people, which is really important as well. I believe Reverend Ellen Rasmussen talked about being a poll chaplain. We're not all chaplains, so we can't do that, but encourage your local faith leader to sort of step in and be a poll chaplain, have a face that people know at the polling sites, right? So there's a number of ways that you can actually be very involved in the election process, which is really good. And then always help provide good contacts and good information to share in your community about what's really going on in the election. You know, post the good stuff to Facebook, right? So that the real information gets out there, which is really great. So those are a couple additional pieces there as well that we can all take action on.
Michael, can I also add, you don't actually have to be in a political party to be an election observer.
Well,
And
thank
it's
you.
one of the most powerful things that you can do. Witnessing, documenting, and showing up to the polls, particularly since 2020, has been one of the best things to turn down bad behavior when people are documented, harassing, yelling, bringing guns to polling locations, targeting people who are because of their skin color. When that gets documented, it's actually much easier for us most people to be able to navigate whether their rules have been violated. So even if you're not as a political party observer, going to the polls and being an observer at any point in time, or central counts if you have a central count in your Wisconsin community, those are really, really helpful and powerful acts as an observer. And the second thing I wanted to echo around faith is that we employed a bunch of faith leaders as de-escalators during the 2022 election, after 2020 election, and some in 2020, and it was a really powerful tool. So even your faith in action helping to de-escalate potential perceptions of conflict or actual conflict that's happening at the polls based on political tensions, it has been a really great positive thing in Green Bay.
Great. Representative Wagner, do you know how does someone sign up to be an election observer? Do you know?
So you can do a couple ways. You can go to the parties themselves, which they then submit a list to become a election observer or poll observer. But you can also just go on the day of the election, either at a central count or a polling location, check in with the person either that's the head of the polling location or the clerk themselves, and you can just become an observer that day. So there is no application process, good or bad. Anyone can show up when they want. So it's one of the few positions that has almost no barrier to entry, but it has a lot of power associated with it. And we did see the bad actors use this tool the opposite, which is that most people don't typically go to this, and then they would recruit people from out of state and out of those communities to fill these like central counts and harass them. So it's always nice to see pro-democracy people, regardless of political affiliation, show up to be an election observer. You just show up on election day, or talk to the clerk or the head person at your polling location. But you can sign up with a political party as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I did drop the link in there about the poll chaplains. Thank you for clarifying that anybody can sign up to do that. I didn't realize that. So thank you for clarifying that for us. So another option for you as well. So a bunch of great information. We'll try to, I see a note there that League of Women Voters also works with some election observers as well. So another opportunity through that network there also. So like I said, we're going to take all this information you shared. I've grabbed everything from the chat that I think I can find and sort of work through some of this and add in some additional information to hopefully send out to everyone. Mary Beth, I see that your hand is up. Did you have a question? I don't want to miss you.
Yes, thank you so much. I apologize for being a bit of a chaotic participant today, but I'm dealing with an unexpected car issue and still wanted to be here. So I've been tracking the conversation. I had to step away before, which is why I was confused when you were asking for someone to chime in, and I thought maybe I missed the group introductions. But anyway, with all that behind us, my name is Mary Beth Collins, and I'm at the Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we help to facilitate the Civic Health of Wisconsin initiative. I'm putting the link in the chat, but related to various topics discussed today and questions posed, but where I tried to type in my response, but I was having a hard time getting to it as quickly as I wanted to because I'm not in front of my computer. I just wanted to share that we have a media discernment training project that was generously funded by the Universities of Wisconsin, which will be provided to Universities of Wisconsin campuses to reach students all academic year, but we're going to try to really make sure that we get it out in the fall before the election, because in addition to discussing trusted sources and opportunities to share good information, there's sort of the other side of that, which is that many people just open up their apps in the morning and, you know, whatever information happens to come in is sort of what they're looking at. And so there's this other task at hand in my view that we're working on to prepare, especially college students, to do good media discernment and do, you know, understanding cognitive bias and the attention economy and the way that AI generated information is, you know, going around out there, and viral content is often more incendiary content, and all those themes that we now have a better handle on as we go through the years of this work. So I'll be sure to send information about those opportunities. We're going to have like a train the trainer model. So people on various Universities of Wisconsin campuses can get the curriculum and the video content and then facilitate trainings on site in place. And so some of you are aware of that project, but I just wanted to highlight it and hopefully get it into the digest of this meeting, because I'm hoping it'll be a nice add to the overall landscape for this particular cycle. Thank you so much for letting me say that out loud. It was too much to get in the chat when I was typing away on my phone.
Yeah, no, that's really great, Mary Beth. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'll be looking forward for that information as well. Thank you, Paul. There were some questions I missed. Alexandra, sorry if I missed your questions there. Actually said that I joined this when I saw the League of Women Voters post. I cannot work at the polls because I'm running, but I am hoping to help in some of this work. Is there a way for me to help in this work? Um, yes, let's connect and see if there's a way that we can get you involved in some way, shape, or form. If you have another question, please just drop again. Oh, any advice for candidates to do some of this work while running?
Sorry,
Uh,
I had accidentally responded, I thought, to an individual person, and then I was like, oh no, I just like randomly sent it to a person instead of to the whole group. But yeah, no, I'm just wondering, like I joined it because this meeting because accuracy and information and like maintaining our institutions is really important to me. And so if there's any resources you have for candidates, I would really appreciate it.
Great, yeah. Not at my fingertips, but we'll work on that and get some of that out to you as well.
Alexandra, I can connect with you. I'm happy to talk both in the building about like official things you can do, and then outside the building about like political things that you can do. I think there is a role for candidates, just to give you some good examples of modeling behavior. In the 22 elections, there was groups of Democrats that before when the polls closed, had press conferences, sometimes with their Republican opponents, saying that we're going to respect the results of the election and we're going to thank the poll workers and the voters for coming out. So there are these things that people can do as candidates that really do say that we're going to commit to and support the results of the elections. And if they can't do it together, we've asked other folks to do this. We did this in non-partisan elections. We did this in other elections. Just modeling that we're going to accept the results and that we thank the people putting it on together is a great way to build trust before these fights. And you can even add the caveat that obviously we're going to try every legal means if we see that there's some malfeasance. But like that's just one easy thing. And I will say, while you can't be in the polls, volunteers and supporters can help monitor polls even on your campaign's behalf. And members of the community can participate as both observers and poll workers, as long as they're like not your campaign manager. And so that's one. And then the last thing is, I think democracy benefits everybody, and every candidate should be talking about respecting the will of voters and honoring the men and women of our community that help put our elections on, and doing that from the get-go is just really good practice. And we've seen that reduce tension when everyone's kind of singing the same song. So those are really quick ones, but I'm happy to talk to you offline. What are other political things you can do? And I can send you some links to some pro-democracy, nonpartisan pro-democracy groups like ours that are encouraging both talking points, videos, social media, and other trainings and tools, just to make sure that democracy is part of the larger campaign conversation, even during campaigns.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Love when we have a great team who can answer questions. Well, I can't. Love it. Love it. So, well, that is the information we have. If there's no other questions, I believe my official job is to turn it back over to Lisa Lewis, who does some kind of a conclusion. Or Sam. I see Sam raising their hand.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I guess maybe this is good timing. I didn't want to take away from the conversation. And this has been an incredible meeting. So I just want to say thanks, Mike and every Ali, Faith, Ahmad for this incredible session and so much great information. I guess my question is, since we have WISAC members here, I'm going to maybe put Paul and David on the spot a little bit. I guess I'm just curious, the meeting that you attended yesterday, I know you've shared a little bit about it, but I'm curious if there are any other key parts from that you think would be relevant to the rest of the members here in terms of like what I don't know, highlights from that. And then Paul, I guess the other thing I just want folks in this room to know about is your upcoming trip on behalf of the state of Wisconsin and WISAC to the Carter Center in Georgia, which I think is coming up next week. And if you could just share with folks about that kind of broader reach that WISAC is having and conversations like this are having as well.
That's great. Thanks for the prompts, Sam. David, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Anything
Yeah.
that you think is key from yesterday?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So it was a coalition of sort of like-minded groups, protect democracy groups, led by the Democracy, I'm going to get this wrong,
Defense Project.
Democracy Defense Project, which is led in the state by former Congressman Scott Klug, Republican from Madison, and former Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett. And there are other groups involved, including All Voting is Local, that we have worked with in the past. Great group, nonpartisan, promotes voting across the board. But I think the main topic of discussion was should we, as a collective group of groups, support legislation to allow Monday processing of ballots? Which, if you're not familiar with that, this simply means right now, according to state law, absentee ballots cannot be processed at all, touched, until 7 a.m. on election day. And in large communities like Milwaukee, where there's a ton of absentee ballots, it just means it's going to take a lot longer to count those ballots. And that leads to this false narrative that you hear almost every election that there's this big ballot dump and somehow favor Democrat. It's untrue. It's a lie. It's used for political purposes, but this would help eliminate it. Paulina in Milwaukee, the clerk there, said that if I could just press the ballots flat before election day, I could be done by 10 o'clock because they get kind of bumpy and folded, and all that. So the ask was, could we as a group of groups advocate for that when the legislature goes back into session? We'll have a new legislature, new leadership on both houses, and a new governor. So it's come close before. It's always been held up by a few folks who still believe in the fraud narrative or believe in it as a political tool. And so we think that there's a good chance we can get that done. And I I will speak for WISAC, but I think that it's something typically we don't get involved in partisan issues in the legislature for obvious reasons. We're a cross-partisan group. But this is one that's about election integrity. It's about efficiency. It's about making the system work better for everyone. And by the way, it's got like 80% support across the board from the public. And so it feels to me like something that this group might want to sign on to. And that could mean signing on to an op-ed, signing on to a social media program, signing on to a letter to the legislature, or something like that. So let me stop there. Paul?
Yeah, that's great, David. I think I would just add a couple quick things to that. One thing that I think is an important takeaway from yesterday was sort of the basic idea that we should form a coalition of people, groups doing similar work. And you'd think there already would be, but I'm pretty new to this, but it does not seem like there's really a coalition. So that was part of the purpose of the meeting, at least as I understood it, was just to say, hey, we have similar missions. We should work together, and maybe one of the ways we could work together is on a cross-partisan initiative that we can all get behind, and so that's where the conversation led there. So you'll be hearing more about WISAC folks will be hearing more about this coming up because that coalition should be formalized soon. What are we actually saying we're going to do together, and the specifics of this potential push for Monday processing. The other thing about it that was really great was, as you can imagine, just being in the same room with folks, all of whom none of whom I had met before, if I remember right, except for Scott Klug, because he was at our conference in Oshkosh in the spring. But some concrete things have already, ideas at least, and actions have come out of that. So if you didn't catch it, the two YouTube links that I posted earlier, I remember something about this, but meeting Lee Rash from Leader Ethics Group, which has 10 times as many followers as we do. WISAC is still pretty small. And that's fine. I think we've got a particular niche, we want to grow, but they're a bigger group, and I think they consider themselves small compared to some other ones. But point is, we partnered together in 24 to put these public service announcements out, and there was nothing that dates them in those PSAs, so we can use them again. So that's something that people can start sharing now. It's all cross-partisan messages about not falling for disinformation, taking elections seriously, voting. and that kind of thing. The other part of Sam's prompt, tomorrow, Mike Ford, who's the director of the Whitburn Center, who's on the call, he and I are representing WISACT on a trip to Atlanta that is happening early next week. And it's every 6 months. We're part of a network of networks, Democracy Resilience Networks. Ours is called WISACT. The other 5 states have their own names, but the Carter Center, which is the main supporter of this effort, considers us Democracy Resilience Networks, which I think is a great concept. And so it's cool. We're in that we get to be in this network of networks. There are regular Zoom calls, but then twice a year we get together in person to look at how these organizations collectively have done over the past year, to get updates on things we should be considering, and in some ways doing the same sort of thing we were just talking about at the Wisconsin level. Can we coordinate? And we have done some collaboration with other groups, including the Belfast trip that some of you probably heard about from March, but other things, messaging and so forth that we share amongst each other that's really helpful. So there'll be more to report on that soon, and I'll including in the newsletter that I plan to put out for WISAC next week. So Lisa, do you want to, unless there's anything else from anyone else, Lisa, do you want to close us out?
Yes, I can close us out. Before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that today is the last day to complete our member survey. That is how the Carter Center and WISAC know what's working, what to improve, and how to make the case that networks like ours are helping to strengthen our democracy. It's anonymous and takes 5 to 7 minutes. If you have not completed it already, please take a few minutes to complete it now, whether you are formally joined WISAC or not. I have the link in the chat right now. And then I want to thank you all again for coming today. If you have any further questions, you can email the Whitburn Center at whitburncenter@uwosh.edu. We invite you to join us for July's virtual WISACT monthly meeting on Wednesday, July 29th. We will send out details closer to the date. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.